If I dislike it, it must be wrong. There are 4 words today that are ripping through the world of church. 4 words that are pitting one Christian against another, dividing parent and child, husband and wife, youth group against senior citizen group. And those 4 words are these: I hate that music. Picture the scene where congregations are splitting into sections. The traditional service is over here, maybe at 8:30 in the morning. Then at 10 in this building, there are drums and keyboards and enough electrical wires and cables and speakers and monitors and flashing lights to accommodate a Madonna concert in Madison Square Garden. The Fanny Crosby fans walk by and see these amps and feel the vibration and the beat as kids sing All Things Possible. And they say to each other, I hate that music. Of course, maybe the people who like contemporary music are saying about the slower stuff, I hate that music, meaning that it goes both ways. Well, right now, my own shoulders are sagging just a little bit because of the sources that I generally turn to a lot in my sermons, my radio ministry. Well, one of those sources has just absolutely failed me. I mean, he's let us down completely. Fortunately, I'm not talking about one of the writers in the Bible, but the late great Christian writer and apologist, C.S. Lewis. He's been a valuable resource over the years in my ministry. So often I've turned to great classic books of his like Mere Christianity or The Four Loves, and his insights are just about 99% of the time so solid, so blessed by God with wisdom and biblical integrity. But now, in a study about the biblical issue of music and worship, I find that Mr. Clive Staples Lewis completely lets us down, meaning that it goes both ways. Someone has once said that the music department in heaven was the War Department. But right now, my own shoulders are sagging just a little bit because of the sources that I generally turn to a lot in my radio ministry and my pastoral ministry. One of those key sources has just absolutely failed me. I mean, he's let us down completely. Now, fortunately, I'm not talking about one of the writers in the Bible, but the late great Christian writer and apologist C.S. Lewis has been a valuable resource over the years. So often I've turned to great classic books of his like Mere Christianity or The Four Loves. And his insights, just about 99% of the time, are so solid, so blessed by God with wisdom and biblical integrity. But now, in a study about the biblical issue of music and worship, well, I find that Mr. Clive Staples Lewis completely lets us down because this brilliant, dedicated, wise Christian scholar simply hated all Christian music, all of it. He hated all of the Christian music. If it had drums, he hated it. If it had pipe organs, he hated it. Piano, hate. Stained glass, hate. Orchestra, hate. Long hymns, he hated them. Short ones, hated them. Praise songs, not invented yet when he was alive, but he would have hated them too. For whatever reason, this Cambridge and Oxford educated bred Don, this brilliant man, he looked down his nose at all Christian music and hated all of it. He honestly thought all of it was lousy. Now, maybe you're saying, oh, come on, you're overstating it. All right, let me share with you from his own pen what he has to say. Watch this quotation. In an interview dated back to 1944, which admittedly is before Michael W. Smith and Sixpence, None the Richer came along, someone once asked C.S. Lewis, is attendance at a place of worship or membership with a Christian community necessary to a Christian way of life? Well, that's a very appropriate question during COVID-19, wouldn't you say? Or as millions of us mutter out in the parking lot, I hate that music. But C.S. Lewis, with all his PhDs, makes this admission word for word. I disliked very much their hymns, which I consider to be fifth-rate poems set to sixth-rate music. Ouch! Is that a stinger? Fifth-rate poems set to sixth-rate music. Week after week, he would sit there in the chapels or cathedrals of England and sigh to himself about the songs. He just thought they were junky, inferior music. It set his teeth on edge. Another time, a well-meaning person asked him what he thought could be improved about the church. How we all light up with that kind of a survey. But again, this great Christian writer, whose words are usually such a beacon to us, kind of sniffed. What I, like many laymen, chiefly desire in church are fewer, better, and shorter hymns, especially fewer. Very clearly, here was a man who often said to himself or others, "Dash it all, I hate that music." I'll return a few stanzas later in the hymnal to our pompous, nose-in-the-air friend Mr. Lewis and see if he himself decided to quit going to church because the music was so bad. There are some very valuable lessons we can learn from a confession that he makes later in the same interview. But I invite you to consider 3 resources to the issue of "I hate that music." More specifically, this very human reaction, that music is wrong because I hate it, or evil, or should be banned. All around the world, good, sincere Christians are convinced that music being played in their church is displeasing to God and that the amps ought to be unplugged. Now, here are the 3 points. The first one is a concession. I can only speak for me as I read my Bible and spin my CDs and go to my church. But yes, I'm convinced that there is music being played today that is antithetical to or against the principle of true Christian worship. Is there rock and roll music that is wrong, that is tainted by sinfulness? I believe there is. Is there music that displeases God? I believe there is. Is that music sometimes played in church? Sometimes. Yes. Now back to that brilliant, warm, encompassing article in the Adventist Review. Former editor Bill Johnson, after reaching out to these various groups, concedes, and I'm quoting, "I have no doubt that some music in Adventist churches has gone beyond the bounds." He goes on to point out that some of the praise music being sung today in our churches is, as it seems to him, shallow in both tunes and words. A much stronger opinion is being registered by another book floating around in my denomination, according to Dr. Samuel Bacchiocchi. Quote, "Rock and roll is not just a musical style, but a revolutionary religious movement." And a bit later he says, "Rock music is not just another musical genre that can be sanitized to worship God and proclaim the gospel. A closer look at the rock scene reveals that rock and roll embodies an end-time apostate religious movement of open rebellion against God and the moral principles revealed in His Word." End of quote. And later in the same volume comes this criticism: "The mixture of good and evil in rock music may well represent an effective satanic strategy to use the good lyrics to lead some Christians to accept more readily the evil ones." End of quote. Wow. And of course, friend, no one book can solve the issue of what music ought to or ought not to be played and sung in our churches. And not on a bunch of sermons or talks like this, 10 years of radio programs. The issue here is this: what do we do when we hate church music? And is it possible that some music ought to be hated? From where I'm sitting today, the answer to that first question must prayerfully be a yes. There is music that does not belong in a Christian setting, a worship experience where we want Christ to be uplifted and exalted and the Holy Spirit to be present. But question number 2 is this: is it possible, just asking, is it possible to believe that music is wrong or sinful or inappropriate Perhaps not because we know enough to know that for sure, but simply because we don't like that music. Is that possible? Is it possible to quickly go from, I hate that music, to everyone should hate that music? That is bad music. In the same Very Well Christianity Today article entitled, Triumph of the Praise Songs, How Guitars Beat Out the Organ in the Worship Wars, Michael S. Hamilton makes this point. Every complaint about worship music, no matter which style, claims to be rooted in theological principles. Yet, in every critique, the theology aligns perfectly with the critic's own musical taste. What's he saying here? A critic says, the rap music genre is inherently evil. It has no place in church. Question: do you personally like rap music? Answer: heavens, no, I hate it. Is that a coincidence? The point is that not liking something and condemning it might often go hand in hand. However, I might argue with the writer of this article just a bit. I have no doubt that there are musicians who, to pick an example, have succeeded in the rock and roll culture for years. They've liked it, they've performed it, they lived it, they breathed it. And then as God moves upon their heart, they feel led to reject at least some forms of the very music that all their lives they have enjoyed and had an affinity for. In their inward souls, they like it still. And yet they see the fruits, the results of some kinds of rock music, and spiritually ask God to help them put it out of their lives. That would be a tough battle, and yet one we all should consider in our own lives. Still, friend, as the noise of battle surrounds us in our church parking lots and in our youth fellowship halls, it might be well for us to join C.S. Lewis in realizing just because I don't like this music isn't an ironclad guarantee that it's wrong everywhere, every day, for everyone. Bill Johnson, in his editorial, writes about this new music, and I'm quoting, "This is sound from somewhere else which I do not understand, but faintly appreciate." But then he adds, "What I appreciate is the fervent love for Jesus that I see in the young people who do understand and appreciate it. I covet their spirit of commitment to Christ and His mission. Seeing them, knowing them, I cannot write off their music, dismiss it with simplistic taglines." Stay tuned.